Hi everyone, Krista Cowan here with a special Ancestry Aces exclusive look at AncestryDNA. We've been getting a lot of questions on Facebook and through some of our social media channels, and then via email and through our member services about people who have taken the DNA test. They've gotten their results and they're either confused by them or they don't know what to do with them. And so that's some of the questions that I'm going to try and answer in the time that we have together tonight. I expect this presentation to be about between 30 and 35 minutes long. If you're watching this live, Stephen's available on chat to answer questions as we go, but don't inundate him with too much. Try to pay attention to the presentation. Your questions may be answered as we go. Of course, if you have additional questions, Stephen and I will both be available on chat immediately following the presentation, and we can answer those questions as best as we can. If you're watching an archived version of this, feel free to leave your comments or questions on the YouTube channel here just right under the video, and we'll monitor those and respond to those as appropriate. If we need to have a follow-up session, we will look at scheduling that maybe in the future in the next couple of weeks. With all of that said, let me just tell you the approach that I'm going to take today. It looks like we have several hundred people watching this live right now, and I expect that you all have varying degrees of education about DNA in particular. I happen to know a few people on the line who are experts in this, some of us who, like myself, are a little bit science challenged and really don't understand some of the basics of it. So I have tried to just make this as simple as possible and yet still provide valuable information. So hopefully that will come across. My goal is to teach you so clearly you can't possibly misunderstand. We'll see how I do. Let's dive into the top questions that we receive as we start talking about AncestryDNA. And this is going to kind of be our agenda for the next half hour or so that we have together. The first question that we get repeatedly is, in one form or another, what's up with all the different DNA tests, the different kinds of tests? We'll cover that. We're getting a lot of questions about, so I took my DNA test, I got my results, and now I don't know what this all means. What is it that I'm looking at? So we'll take a look at the results from my DNA test and walk through that screen so that you know what the different things are that you're looking at. One of the big questions that we're getting a lot is, why does my DNA ethnicity differ from what I think my ethnicity is based on my family tree research? So we'll look at some reasons for that and maybe some explanations about what that all means. As part of your results, we give you cousin matches. So a lot of you are asking questions about matches that don't look like they match. You're also asking questions about why you have so many matches and how that could possibly help you. So we'll spend the last chunk of time this evening talking about those matches, what you can do with them, and how they are designed to help you in your ancestry research or your family history research. So that's our agenda for the time that we have together this evening. Hopefully that gives you an idea of what we're going to cover as we spend our time together. Let's start with the different kinds of DNA tests. So the first DNA test that Ancestry has offered for a while is a Y-DNA test. That particular test can only be taken by males, and it only traces paternal lineage. So that Y chromosome that's passed down from father to son, and from that man to his son, and that man to his son. So you can trace back along a patrilineal or all-male line. An mtDNA test can be taken by anyone, male or female, but it only traces the maternal lineage. So mitochondrial DNA is passed from a woman to her children, but only her daughters pass it on to their children. So both her sons and her daughters have her mitochondrial DNA, but only her daughters pass it on to their children. So as you can see, with these two DNA tests, you're only tracing, if you're looking at a pedigree chart, that very top angle or that very bottom angle were you to be tested. So the new AncestryDNA test that came out at the beginning of this year is what we call an autosomal DNA test, or ATDNA. Anyone can take this test, and I want to be really clear about that because sometimes there's some confusion because of this old Y-DNA test. Anyone can take the new autosomal test. It looks at over 700,000 locations on your DNA, and so it gives you a broader picture of your complete tree, or the genes that you've inherited from the people in your whole tree, rather than just tracing that very top line or that very bottom line of your pedigree. That's the different tests, okay? Let's talk a little bit about these results. So some of you have taken the test already and received your results. As I was looking at chat and at our Facebook page earlier today, some of you have not taken the test yet. So this will be a preview of the results that you're going to get. So let me just hop over here to a web browser. So here's how I did this test, and I don't want anybody to get confused, so let me explain what I did. If I had taken the test, it would have given me my results based on the half of my DNA that I inherited from my father and the half of the DNA that I inherited from my mother. If my sister took the test, she might have slightly different results, because while we both inherit half of our DNA from each of our parents and we have the same parents, the DNA that she inherited from them might be a little bit different than the half that I inherited from them. So siblings can have different results, but you will not have anything that your parents do not also have. And so I made a decision, because both of my parents happen to still be living, that I am going to have each of my parents take the test. What that allows me to do is it allows me to separate out the half of my DNA that's my mother's and the half that's my father's, as opposed to looking at them combined in myself. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have questions, I'll try to clarify that again a little bit later. So these results are actually my father's results. I had him take the test first. Here's what you're going to see. You're going to find those results under your little DNA tab here. What I have done is I have a tree on Ancestry.com. So I have linked my results to my father. So even though I'm the one who has the Ancestry account, he is in my tree, of course, because he's my father. And so I've linked these results directly to him in the tree, in my online tree. So now when I view my results, I get a page that looks like this. And this is, we'll spend some time talking about this, but the first thing you're going to see is your genetic ethnicity. So basically what it is it's Ancestry has taken your DNA and compared it against our database of thousands and thousands and thousands of other samples, where we know where those samples have come from in the world, to determine what percentage of your DNA you have in common with people from those similar regions of the world. So here you can see, for example, my father has 47% Scandinavian, and there's a lot of Scandinavian blood out there we're discovering, and 44% Central European, with 9% uncertain. Now I can click this and view further results. Be sure to read some of these little pop-ups. We give you some helps and some tips and some explanations along the way, and those are helpful, right? Most of the questions that you're asking are almost all directly answered by some of these little tips and hints that we give you along the way. So when I view my genetic ethnicity details, right, what it does is it takes me to a larger section of a map here, right, with the sections highlighted that contain the regions where my ethnicity shows up. And then you'll notice I also have these little numbers on my tree. Now you'll notice my father, on his side of the family, we have a lot of ancestors that were born in England and in Wales and in Scotland, and yet no British Isles ethnicity. And that's to be expected. If you think about the way that migration occurred, lots of that DNA got mixed up or even sometimes completely overtaken. I'll explain that. Be patient. I'll explain that in a little bit more detail here in a minute. If you scroll down, we also provide you with a lot of detail about that particular ethnicity. So I have here a tab for my Scandinavian ethnicity and a tab for my Central European ethnicity. Read those. It will help you understand exactly what regions are covered by that particular ethnicity. It'll provide you with a little bit of history and some information that might help you understand your results a little bit better. And then, of course, if you have more than two ethnic markers in your DNA, then you'll have additional tabs here for what those are. I just happen to just have the 2 and then the 9% uncertain. So that's the top section of your results, is this ethnicity. Now the bottom section of your results is what we call our member matching. And this is where we start getting into those cousins. We'll look at this in detail here in just a minute, but I just wanted to give you a preview of what this is going to look like. What this is we have taken your DNA and we have compared it against the DNA of other Ancestry members who have also taken that DNA test. And if we find sections of your DNA that match, we can tell with a certain level of confidence what the possible range of relationship is between you and this person. So for example, I have here a third cousin based strictly on DNA. With 98% confidence, this man is either a third or a fourth cousin to my father. As you go down the list, you get further away. So now we're into the fourth cousin section, and the confidence drops a little bit. We're down to 96% that this person is a fourth, fifth, or sixth cousin. And you can scroll your way through. Now you'll see here I have a lot of matches. And then we get to distant cousins, which is in the 5th to 8th cousin range. And you'll notice that at that point, the confidence level drops dramatically. Again, all of those matches are based strictly on the DNA. Now, once we've made a DNA match, Ancestry uses the tree that you've uploaded and the tree that the other person has uploaded and compared them. Because your DNA says you match, now let's see if we can tell based on the information you've already discovered in your trees how you're related. So here's this is the third cousin of my father's, and Ancestry, he has a tree online that is public, and I have a tree online, and so Ancestry can take that and compare and can tell me exactly how I'm related to this person. So here is my father and his mother and her mother and her mother and her father. And here is another child of Henry Ditmore and her daughter and her son. And so we can see here that this person is actually not just a third or fourth cousin, but my father's second cousin once removed. I have actually contacted this man, and not only is he a second cousin once removed, but we knew nothing about this branch of the family. He turns out he lives just a few miles away from where my parents live in another state. And not only that, he has visited the place in Germany where this particular great-great-grandfather was born and where his family lived for generations. And he had taken pictures of the church, and he had taken pictures of all sorts of things in that village to give us an idea of what it was like. So just with this one connection, and it's the very first one on my list, I have made a connection with a cousin who has immediate information that helps me enrich my family history story. And that's our hope. That's what we want these results to do for you. Now, you're not going to be so lucky with all of your matches. I happened to have great success on the very first match. And you'll notice I clicked the little star next to it. I made it a favorite. You can toggle that on or off so that I bookmark this. I've also now connected with him on Facebook and a few other places so that we can keep in touch and hopefully continue to share not just information we've already collected, but maybe even collaborate on further research on that particular line. Now, on some of these, you're going to look at the match, review the match, and we're going to compare your trees and we're not going to be able to find the connection. And I'll explain that. I'll explain why in just a minute, so hang with me. But what we are going to show you are any common surnames in your tree. So the DNA has shown that you're connected to this person, that you're related to this person with a certain level of confidence and a certain distance of relationship. So this is a 4th to 6th cousin. But the tree data doesn't prove it out. Okay, which means either we have holes in our research, one or the other of us does, or one or the other of us has traced the incorrect family. Okay, lots of different possibilities there, but we show you just some matching surnames to kind of give you a jump start into knowing where to look. Like I said, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail here in just a minute. I just wanted to give you this view of this is what your results are going to look like if you haven't already looked at them. The ethnicity at the top, and then the matches to other Ancestry members who have taken the test is available here if we have DNA matches. And then if they also have a tree online, we give you the opportunity to view that tree. If they don't have a tree online, and I think I have a few of those in here somewhere, if they don't have a tree online or if their tree is not public, you can, of course, send them a message and ask to either to view their tree or to share your tree with them so that you can make some of those connections. And we hope that you'll do that. So that's the results page. That's how we've laid it out. That's what you're looking at. Okay, let's talk a little bit about these ethnicity results. So the question always is, in some form or another, why does my DNA ethnicity differ from what I know about the countries of origin of my ancestors? And I've thought long and hard about how to present this in a way that makes sense to most people, and hopefully this works. Hopefully this will make sense to you, and if you have questions, feel free to ask. So this is the pedigree chart of my great-great-grandfather. So we've got him in this first position right here. You'll notice that his father was born in Scotland and his mother was born in Tennessee. So my question to you is this. If you were to describe his ethnicity based on that knowledge, father born in Scotland, mother born in Tennessee, how would you describe it? A lot of people would say, well, he's half Scottish and he's half American. Although, interestingly enough, American is not considered a separate ethnicity unless you start getting into Native American ethnicity. So let's go back a generation. His grandfather was born in England, his mother was born in Scotland, and both of his mother's parents were born in the southern United States. So again, how do we describe his ethnicity? Do we say he's a quarter English and a quarter Scottish and 50% American? If we go back another generation, we've got England and England and Scotland and Virginia and Tennessee and Tennessee. Go back one more generation, you'll notice here's Ursula Stockton. We don't know who her parents are. What if both of her parents were born and raised in Germany? Now, all of a sudden, this man who was half Scottish and half American has great-grandparents who are German. So my question is this: at what point do you start breaking down the percentages of your ethnicity when you're talking about your family tree? Ethnicity is something that we just really identify with. Well, I'm a quarter Italian and I'm a quarter German, and we do that based on what we know about where our grandparents were born or where our great-grandparents were born. But how deep in the family tree do you have to go before those people were from entirely different places? Before that ancestor that you thought was Scottish was actually English, was actually German? Or before that ancestor that you thought was from Virginia was actually from Spain? How deep in the tree do you go? Well, those DNA links that get passed down through your DNA go really, really deep. So you just may not have discovered yet where in your family tree some of those ethnic links are that got passed down in your DNA. Let me explain it just one other way that might make a little bit of sense. Many of you have probably seen this. I posted a blog on the Ancestry blog a while ago about this and discussed it with our ACEs group. Here is just a simple chart to show how many people you descend from in 10 generations. So if you are generation 1 and we go back 10 generations, we're talking there are 1,022 people, right? Because, well, you count, but not in this equation. There's 1,022 people that you descend from. And 7 generations is really just a few hundred years ago. How many of those people have you actually already identified in your family tree with documentation? Well, I've been doing this since I was about 12 years old, pretty seriously, and I inherited much of my genealogy, or some of my genealogy, from people who had spent a lot of years working on it. And here's where I stand. I only know 365 of those people, which is really not that many. So if I only know a third of my ancestry, is it possible that the genetic material that I carry comes either from the other 60% of my ancestry that is completely unknown to me, or that it goes back deeper in the tree than where I know these people happen to be from? So that's just something to keep in mind as you start looking at this data. That doesn't make it meaningless by any stretch of the imagination, and people have argued back with me about that. It's still very meaningful, and I'll show you what to do with some of those results. But start to think in terms of things a little bit deeper than just your parents or your grandparents or your great-grandparents. Now, when we start talking about these cousin matches, right? So let's look at some of those. We'll get back to that, I promise. Let's talk about some of those cousin matches, just to make sure you understand how that works, okay? Let's just run down this chart. If you have the same parents, you're siblings. If you have the same grandparents, you're cousins, what we call cousins, but which technically are first cousins. If you share a great-grandparent, that makes you second cousins. Great-great-grandparents makes you third cousins, fourth cousins, fifth cousins, sixth cousins, seventh cousins, and eighth cousins. So as you start looking at those DNA results where it says, right, that this person is related to you as either a fourth, fifth, or sixth cousin, you have to come back here and say, okay, well, if this person is my sixth cousin, it means that we share a fifth great-grandparent. Well, I only know 75 out of my 128 fifth great-grandparents. So it's possible that they are related to me. Absolutely, the DNA says so, but that they're related to me by one of these people that I don't know yet, that I haven't yet discovered on my tree. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So that's how I look at those cousin matches. Okay, now, before we start diving into what we do with those cousin matches, let me just go back to this. This is a silly analogy, and it's very, very, very simplistic. DNA is a lot more complicated than this, but I am not a science person, and so this is the way that I came up with to explain it to myself so that I understood where some of the confusion comes from. Okay, so let's just imagine for just a minute that this is what makes up your DNA. Okay, we're fruits and vegetables today for the sake of our analogy. This is what makes up your DNA here at the bottom of the chart. Now, you get 50% of your DNA from your father and 50% of your DNA from your mother. And they got 50% of their DNA from their father and 50% of their DNA from their mother. Hopefully this makes sense, right? So here are your 1, 2, 3, 4 grandparents. Now, one of the misconceptions when we start talking about DNA is that if I get 50% of my DNA from each parent, that means I'm getting a half an orange and a half a watermelon and a half a strawberry and a half an apple. And that is incorrect, right? You're not getting half of everything that makes up their DNA. You're getting half of their DNA. So you're not a fruit salad or a stir fry, right? What makes up your DNA is half of their DNA. So this particular grandparent passed along a strawberry and a watermelon. That's 50% of their DNA. And this grandparent passed along a cantaloupe and a lime, and that's half of their DNA, right? And then this parent passed along the watermelon and the strawberry to you. Now I want you to note, and again, remember, this is a very simplistic explanation of a very complicated thing, right? But notice now, you don't have anything in your DNA from this particular grandparent, right? The the cantaloupe and the lime didn't get passed on to you. Now maybe you have a sibling who got the lime and the watermelon, right? They got 50% of their DNA from your same parent, but they may have received a different 50%. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense as you see the way that DNA comes down through the generations. And some of this stuff can go so deep. Some of this stuff could have been passed on literally for thousands of years, and yet some stuff disappears. Mathematically, it's probably not likely that it disappears this quickly, right? I did simple numbers and simple things to explain a complicated process, but it's very possible that you lose strands of DNA from relatives as you go. So keep that in mind, again, as well. As you start looking at those ethnicity results, we have people who are saying, but I know I am this thing. That's very possible based on a straight pedigree chart. But based on the way that DNA gets inherited, it's possible that some of that gets lost over time. Okay, so let's spend our last few minutes talking about these cousin matches in particular. First of all, what do you mean, and what do they mean, and what do you do with all of them? So I showed you, for example, that first match that I have here on my tree. Turns out it really is a cousin, and we really do show you the connection. As I scroll down this list, you'll see that I do have a few others where Ancestry was able to find the match in the tree, right? So it's able to tell me exactly how we're related, because both of us, both on my side and on the side of the person that matched with me, have been able to trace back to a common grandparent or great whatever grandparent. However, on the majority, I think I've got 3 of those. On the majority, what I'm seeing are matches that look like this, where Ancestry is not able to compare enough information, and that there's not enough information in the trees to compare to decide whether or not this person is really related to me. So there's a couple of things that you can do with these search results. The first thing that I would recommend is to click on this Maps and Location button. What that does is it takes the birth locations from both of your trees and it puts them on a map. Now remember, okay, and I feel like I need to say this because I've seen some confusion about this. We're not mapping the birthplace of every single person in your tree. We're only mapping and comparing the people in your tree who you directly descend from. You don't have the DNA of your aunt or your great uncle. You have the DNA of your parents, who have the DNA of their parents, who have the DNA of their parents. So this is just, it seems like a redundant phrase, but just direct ancestors, right? Hopefully that's clear. So we put on this map those places that are the birthplaces of those direct ancestors. Now you'll notice in this case, their tree has birthplaces in blue. If it's from my tree, it's in gray. Excuse me. And if it's a shared location, it's in green. So I can then zoom in on these locations to see exactly what's going on here. Now you notice that 6 just split out into a 2 and a 4. Let me show you that again. That 6, right, as we zoom in, the map refines to more specific locations because you're zooming in, and those numbers start to split up into specific locations. I can then, zoom in a little bit more here. I can then hover over this and it will tell me who in the tree, who in my tree is from that place. I can hover over these again, who in my tree is from that place, so that I can start to see what some of those shared locations are. If there are clusters, I can look at those people in my tree, compare it with those same people in their tree. Oftentimes, particularly as you start to get back into the 1700s and the 1600s, if you have family in the same place at the same time, chances are that's going to be where you're going to make those connections, because the population in those places at those times was often very low. So use the map as kind of a visual, if you're a visual person, to start to zoom in on some of those locations to see what you share, what some of those cluster groups are, okay? Also, you're going to want to pay attention to the detail that you've included. So for example, on my tree, in almost every case that I've looked at here, I have the town and the county and the state listed. But for some of them, all I have listed is just the county, or in some cases just the state. And so it may be that they're from the exact same place. I just haven't done enough research to narrow down to a very specific location. So start to pay attention to some of those things, collect more information, look for those clusters in that map. Now here's how these surnames work. Again, all we've done is anybody who matches your DNA, we've taken and compared your trees. And then we just show you common surnames in your tree. Now you're looking at my surname list here that matches this person, and you're laughing. I know you are, because two of the surnames on that list are Jones and Smith. And so it's very possible that we don't match on either of those surnames. As a matter of fact, it's possible that our common ancestor is not any one of these three surnames. This is just a little jump start to give you a possible location in the tree where you could start looking. So I'm going to click on Peck, because that's the one that's the least common surname. And here's what it's going to show me. So for example, in my tree, I have an ancestor whose name is Abigail Peck. What I have recorded about her is that she was born in about 1758. This person whose DNA matches mine has a Rhoda Peck, born in January of 1760 in Ashford, Connecticut. That's really specific. You'll notice I don't have nearly that much information. So looking at these birth dates, it's very possible that these two women are sisters, or maybe first cousins. In order to prove that, there's a couple of things that I would need to do. I would need to first find out more information about Abigail Peck, right? If I don't even know where she was born, if I don't even know what state she was born in, right, then there's no possible way to rule out that she is related to Rhoda. Now, if I go in and find out that that Abigail Peck was actually born in England in 1758, the chances that she's Rhoda's sister go down exponentially. Not that they couldn't have migrated in that 2-year span, but probably not. So those are the kinds of things you want to look for, is where can I do more research that might help me figure this out? Now, I would also want to look and see if I know anything about Abigail's parents, and then I would want to check this tree and see if she knows anything about Rhoda's parents. Or maybe she knows something about Rhoda's brothers and sisters. She may even have Abigail in her tree as a sister to Rhoda, but if she doesn't know who Rhoda's parents are, and I don't know who Abigail's parents are, then there's no direct connection, because we descend from different members of that family. So again, remember, it's not just anybody in your tree that we're matching. We're only matching on those direct ancestors. So look for these kinds of things where you can do more research, or where you can maybe share or solicit information from the other tree owner to determine if this is indeed a match or not. It's one of those opportunities to connect and collaborate with people in genealogy that is really just going to grow our family trees so much faster. Other people have access to information that we might not have. Other people have had artifacts, family Bibles, letters, pictures passed down through the family branches that could have ended up anywhere. And all of a sudden, this becomes a whole new adventure in genealogy because we're doing our research in a really focused, very directed way based on the surname information or this mapping information, looking for clusters and locations to make some of these connections. You're going to be able to see really quickly where the holes are in your tree. You're going to be able to see really quickly where the possible connections are. Again, if we just go back to that pedigree chart for my great-grandfather, there's this giant hole right here where Ursula's parents should be. And let me explain to you why that's significant. So I did a research project for Samuel Mulliner here. And I've shared this with some of you before, so you may be sick of this story, but it's a really powerful example. Samuel, I decided that I wanted to trace all of his descendants. I wanted to find anybody possibly living today who might be able to claim him as an ancestor. And it took me several years, and I'm still finding little branches of the family even now, even though I'm not actively working on it. But what we discovered is over 8,600 descendants from this one man born just over 200 years ago. So imagine how that number increases exponentially every generation you go back. So by the time I get here to Ursula's parents, who were likely born in probably, maybe the mid-1720s, we could have tens of thousands of descendants from that one couple, and yet I don't know who they are. And so as this DNA, as these cousin matches show up in your tree, pay attention to some of those common surnames and some of those clusters on that map. It will give you a really directed way to start doing some of that research and to start doing it in concert with others who are just as motivated, many of them, to find the answers to some of those questions. One last thing I just want to point out about these cousin matches. As new people take this test and new results get entered into the database and new matches are made, you're going to see those show up on your list. So, for example, see here, I have a little blue dot next to this match right here, and it's because I haven't looked at it. It's an unviewed match because it's a new match since I last went through my list, okay? So look for those little blue dots to check those new matches. You'll notice I also use this star system where I have looked at these trees and either there is a definitive match, as in the case of Colleen and James, or in this case, I have looked at it and I think I know where the match might be. And so this one I'm actually excited about doing some research to see if I can figure out exactly how we're related. So that's how I use those cousin results, those cousin matches. That's what I do with them to further that research and to focus my research and to help me collaborate a little better with some of those cousins. Hopefully that has been helpful to you. Again, if you're watching this presentation live and you're on chat right now, I will be on chat in just a few minutes as soon as we conclude. Feel free to ask any questions that either were not addressed or were not clear during this presentation. If you have additional questions that weren't addressed, or if you're watching an archived version of this, feel free to leave a comment on our YouTube channel once we get this video archived, or you can email at ask@ancestry.com. Just be sure to include DNA in the subject line so that we can filter those emails, and if we need a follow-up presentation, we'll schedule that, or watch our blog posts and we'll see if we can't answer some of the more common questions that are coming up as you get into these new and exciting DNA results. Until next time, this is Krista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.